are starting a brand new series this morning that we are calling Stories. The series idea for this actually came from someone in our congregation who said, hey, have you ever thought about doing a series on the parables of Jesus? And I was like, well, I've done it before, but that's a great idea. That happened to be the same week that I was doing sermon planning for this year. And so, Josh and I actually went away, we prayed over this, like, hey, what do our people want to learn? And we love this idea, especially in the summer, about telling stories and sharing the stories of Jesus. Because Jesus taught in this really interesting way. I share a lot of stories in my sermons, but Jesus, that's all he did was tell stories. And sometimes he would share a story and people would go, huh, what does that mean? He's like, well, it's not for you to know. And the disciples were like, Jesus, tell us. And be like, all right, I'll tell you guys. And so what we see is these stories that have these deeper teachings and deeper meaning and deeper understanding. And so this summer, for all of the summer, really, all the way into August, we're going to be teaching the different stories and the different parables of Jesus. We're going to have some of our other elders teach as well in this, and we're going to tear apart some of these parables and look at one story a week that Jesus told and figure out what we can learn from it. I love the idea of this series because I love the idea of story. There's something about stories that we as human beings are like we crave a good story, don't we? Right? We always want, the person who has the crazy stories, we want that person at the party. My wife used to work the night shift at the emergency room, and she came home with the craziest stories. About people who got crossed in bad drug deals and there were giant wads of cash. This is true, right? She'll tell you about it later because it's a great story. We read fiction books because we're looking for a great story, or even better, a nonfiction book that tells a true story that seems unbelievable. There's something about movies in the summer. I love this idea of the movie blockbuster. In fact, this summer we got a movie pass so that our family could go to the movies because we love the idea of story and going and seeing a story told in visual medium. Well, I love it. One of my favorite movies, and I love watching especially in the summer, one of my favorite trilogies is the Back to the Future trilogy. You guys like Back to the Future, right? I love the story of Doc and Marty going all throughout time and breaking things and then having to go back and fix things. And my favorite of the three movies is actually the second, Back to the Future 2. And in it, there's a question that Marty wrestles with. And the question is, what would it look like if I had the ability to make my future better? So there's a clip from this movie that I want to show you right now. Maybe.
Hey, kid, thumb $100, will you, and help save the clock tower?
Sorry, no.
Come on, kid, that's an important historical landmark.
Look, some other time.
Lightning struck that thing 60 years ago.
Wait a minute. Cubs win World Series. Against Miami?
Yeah, it's something, huh? Who would have thought? 100 to 1 shot. I wish I could go back to the beginning of the season, put some money on the Cubs.
I just meant the Miami. What did you just say?
I said I wish I could go back to the beginning of the season, put some money on the Cubbies.
Now this has an interesting feature. It has a dust jacket. Books used to have these to protect the covers. Of course, that was before they had dust repellent paper. And if you're interested in dust, we have a quaint little piece from the 1980s. It's called a dust buster.
Marty!
I can't lose.
Marty, up here!
Hey, Doc, what's going on?
Stand by, I'll park over there.
Hi, honey. Hi, buddy.
What's this?
It's a souvenir.
50 years of sports statistics. Hardly recreational reading material, Marty.
Well, hey, Doc, and what's the harm in bringing back a little info on the future? Maybe we could place a couple bets.
Marty, I didn't invent the time machine for financial gain. The intent here is to gain a clear perception of humanity. Where we've been, where we're going, the pitfalls and the possibilities, the perils and the promise. Perhaps even an answer to that universal question. Why?
Hey, Doc, I'm all for that. What's wrong with making a few bucks on the side?
I am going to put this in the trash.
Or Charlie 41.
Great Scott!
If you've seen the movie, you know that Gray's Sports Almanac becomes the central point of tension for the story. because someone else gets it, they go back in time, they change everything, and they have to spend the movie and then the next movie trying to fix all the things that were broken about changing time. And I love what Doc said there, right, about why he created time travel, right? It's about the possibilities, the potentials, the pitfalls, and maybe answering that universal question, why? Marty wanted to, hey, just want to make a few bucks. He's all about that, but making a few extra dollars on the side, right? That seems great, right? Haven't we all been there at some point, that idea that, man, if I could just go back in time and make that investment in Apple or Google or Netflix, think how much money I would have. If I could go back in time and bet on the Cubs, right? Always bet on the Cubs, except for most all but 1 year of their entire organizational history. You could sell your soul and bet on the Cardinals, but there's a price to pay for that. Right? If we just had a little bit of future knowledge, we think how much different our situation could be, because it's this idea that if we just had that money, I hear all the time, like, man, if I could just win the lottery. There's something with this idea that about money that would fix some of the things that we have. And I think we all readily admit that money won't fix all of our problems. In fact, a lot of money would probably create more problems. But really, I think what this idea taps into is that we have a fear of the unknown that drives us to search for security. We want security. We want to be comfortable, right? We want this assurance that what risks we take are covered and aren't going to hurt us. Really, I think what it comes down to is that we want to take advantage of opportunities to make our lives easier, safer, better, or more comfortable. I mean, none of us woke up this morning, looked in the mirror and said, okay, make your life really hard today. Let's do it. Let's go. None of us thought, all right, let's take risks that are going to be super dangerous. I don't know if any of you like jumping out of airplanes as a recreational activity. Like, that seems crazy to me. Why would anyone want to do that? You know what you call skydivers? Well, you don't call them. You call the funeral home to come get their remains. Terrifies me. Right? But we want life to be better. None of us thought like, hey, like, I really hope that my life just really gets terrible this week. None of us go to work and work hard going, all right, I'm going to put in the 9 to 5. I'm going to make the investment in this career so my life is worse. Even comfort, right? Comfort is one of the driving factors for how we consume everything. We want our shoes to be comfortable. We want our mattresses to be comfortable. We want our pillows to be comfortable. We want the cars that we drive to be comfortable. I mean, even walking in here today, you know how many times I've touched an air conditioning thermostat? I hear all your complaints. Here's what I need you to know. That Jesus can make miracles happen, but I can't. And our ducts for this building are not run well. You're going to be hot. You're going to be cold. Sorry. But maybe something is more important than your comfort. And the whole sermon today is so people will stop complaining about the temperature of the church. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Here's the problem with all of this, right? I don't think it's bad to want security or want a better life. I mean, like, we want better lives, don't we? I don't think that's bad, but what I do think is that it's nearsighted. I think it gives us a sample understanding of something that's kind of good, and we miss the opportunity for something better. Actually, I think we miss the opportunity for something more valuable or something that's going to add more value to our lives. And hear me when I say this, right? I think that the solution is this, that the most valuable decision that you can make for your future is prioritizing your relationship with God. And here's the thing, I'm a pastor, so like I've got this is my shtick. I kind of preach this a lot. But it's not just something that I believe because it's my job. This is something that I believe will impact your life in a significant way. I think that the most valuable decision that you can do for your future is prioritize your relationship with God. I think you should prioritize your relationship with God more than you prioritize your relationship with your boss, with your work, more than you prioritize your retirement, your savings, more than you prioritize your house or what you eat, or even your relationships with your loved ones. If you prioritize your relationship with God, if you make it the most important relationship, the most important priority you have in your life, I promise you, you will have a more valuable future. The story that we're looking at today, you can find it in Luke chapter 12. In Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 13, it says this. Someone in the crowd said to him, this is Jesus, right? He's teaching to a crowd of people. And someone in the crowd says to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So to understand what this means, you have to understand a little bit more about the inheritance system in ancient Israel. The oldest son in a family got the largest inheritance because it was his job to take care of all the other family members, including siblings and their spouses and their kids, nieces and nephews, right? It is a patriarchal system. The patriarch is in charge of everyone. So the oldest son always got the largest inheritance. And so this man goes to Jesus and says, "Hey, tell my brother to split that with me. Give me some more." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And Jesus is like, "Why is this my problem? Why are you asking, why are you coming at me with this?" Here's the thing, the guy did not know what he was stepping into. Jesus is about to use him as an example. And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness." What a great word, covetousness. If you need any ideas for a Greek tattoo, covetousness, I think is the one. You can imagine how that would look in Greek. What does this mean? Well, it's a reminder not to want what's yours. Guard against all covetousness, for, this is important, one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. One's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Your life is not about the stuff that you have. How many people have ever had to clear out a relative who's passed away's garage or house or storage unit? In that moment, you are thinking the same thing that Jesus thought. One's life should not consist of the abundance of your possessions. It's not about how much stuff you own. I have this problem with books. I love them. I love the way they smell. I love the way they feel when they're in my hand. I love the weight. I love how I can hold a book in one hand and a cup of coffee in another and drink it and still read. I love books. I have hundreds of books filled with shelves, boxes. I lend them to friends. You know how many of those books I've read? Probably 10%. 10%. That's 90% of the books that I own that I have not read. Sometimes we're cleaning stuff out. Ash is like, "What about this book? Can we get rid of this book?" And I go, "Well, no." Or, "Are you going to read it?" "Maybe one day." Why would I get rid of a book? Like, that's my book. I like my books. They're my things. Why would I get rid of them? They're so valuable. They have just think of all the knowledge that I possess. I mean, I don't possess it, but I possess it. And I don't want to get rid of that because in my mind, I see value in the abundance of the things. But the truth is, the majority of those books, I'm never going to read. And it's a misplaced value. Our stuff, the amount of stuff that we have, and guys, our culture has a problem with stuff. What we think is valuable, Jesus reorients and tells us it's really not. He tells them a parable, and this is the story that he tells. He says, the land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I'll do this. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods." You see, on the surface, at first glance, this story seems practical, right? A successful man needs to scale his business. Right? I mean, this is the goal of any entrepreneur. especially one who's in production, is you want to produce so much that you have to scale up, that you need larger warehouses to have more product that ships all over the country or world to get you more money, right? This is the whole point, right? You want to scale your business. You want growth. Growth equals more return. And it seems like a good thing. But I think it's important to understand a little bit more about why this man is building a barn. It's not just to scale his business. There's something deeper. Back up to verse 18. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And even when we look at this passage, we're going, okay, like what's so bad about what this guy wants to do? He's worked hard. He's gotten a lot. He just wants a break. Except his heart, I'm not sure, is in the right place. You see, what I think this man's problem is he had a why problem. His why was misplaced. Simon Sinek wrote a book several years ago called Start With Why. And it says, hey, when we find our why, either as leaders or as business people or as individuals, right, we are all driven by our why. It's why we do what we do. Really, why is the passion behind our actions. And the man in the story, the rich man, his why was misplaced. Why was he needing new barns? So he could relax. So he could kick back. Be lazy for a little bit. Take life easy. And if you're going, I don't see a problem with doing that, I'll remind you of this. That God had already built in a rest cycle every single week. You work, rest. Every week. You rest, work. Rest, work. That's a song. Work. God, please do not clip that. Oh gosh, this is a mistake. If we could go back in time and just change one thing. Oh man. God built in a rest system. In fact, every 7 years, he built in a whole year to rest. Every 50 years, he built in like a super rest year. But the man took it upon himself to go, you know what? I think I've worked hard enough. I'm just going to hang out and be merry. I'm just going to enjoy my stuff, my possessions. His why was misplaced. Why is the passion behind our actions? Let me give you a couple of different examples of whys. One of the things that you may not know about me is that my great-grandmother, before she was a Wood, her last name was Wright. And we are related to the Wright brothers. They're like somewhat cousins. At one point I knew the number, how many removed. But like my family's related to the Wright brothers. And so at points in my life, like I've dived in like super deep on this family history of the Wright brothers and why it was that they invented the airplane. You know why they invented the airplane? It had nothing to do with wanting to be the first to do anything. It's just because they had a passion and curiosity to answer the question, what would happen if we soared? Could we do this? Because they owned a bicycle shop, and through most of the year they would design and build bicycles, but in the summers they would go to Kitty Hawk in North Carolina because it was the perfect conditions, they thought, to get on a attraction, which was a giant box kite with a motor on it, and fly in the air. And they did it. But their passion wasn't aeronautics, their passion was the idea to soar. You know why Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time with 6 championships and 6 NBA Finals MVPs? He never lost an NBA Finals. You know why he's the greatest? And by the way, if you're coming at me going, he's not, LeBron James is the greatest, you can meet me outside after church. We will fight. Again, never lost a Finals. You know why he's the greatest? It's because he was passionate about winning. Even more than basketball itself, Michael wanted and still wants to win. People who play golf with him talk about his trash talk during a golf game. He understood that to beat somebody, to win, it was more than just basketball. He would get one-on-one with somebody and he would win in the psychological game with someone so he could win in the game overall. He loved winning. He was passionate and still is passionate about winning. If he was here and was asked, and we asked the rich man why he wanted a larger barn, I think his response would be, so that I don't have to work. So I can just sit back, relax, eat, drink, have a good time, and not worry, not work. But here's a problem with that concept. Is his focus is selfish. And when our why focuses on ourselves, our purpose will always be selfish. Jesus continues this story. He shows God's response to this man. But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will those be?" The stuff that you have. What good is it? It's just going to be your kids' or grandkids' problem. Right? We know you can't take it with you. Jesus says, so is the one who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God. What Jesus does in this one sentence is he takes something that I'm sure even people at the time were like, what's so bad about what the guy's doing? And he completely flips it. You see, Jesus devalues what the rich man values. The rich man values his stuff. But Jesus goes, what good is that? You can't take that with you. It's like when you get a new phone, right? The iPhone 14, let's say. You get it, it's like, wow, great. Look at my crazy, awesome new phone. It's the best iPhone ever. And then like your friend comes like, well, I got the iPhone 14 Pro. And you're like, oh, maybe mine's not. Maybe what I thought was great isn't so great. Jesus does this, right? He devalues in this moment what this man thought was so great. And the whole crowd listening to this story understands this in a deeper way. Let me put it to you this way. What we have means little to God if its purpose is selfish comfort. Your possessions, if it's just for you, it means little to God. I'm convicted about this week because even last week and several times from this stage, I have stated how much I would love to own a jet ski or a fleet of jet skis for my own selfish purposes of jumping waves, having lake days, and having a great old time. And I was convicted because I don't want to jet ski for anybody else. I just want one for me. My own motorcycle. It would be so great. So the conviction is, well, how can you want stuff like this if it's just for selfish purposes? So I have decided that I am starting a new ministry called Jet Skis for Jesus. We are taking donations. Not really. Spend the morning on the lake. Then we'll all practice walking on water and praying. Right? If what we have is just for our purpose is just selfish comfort, I think it means very little to God. Jesus talks about this concept, this idea of investing or laying up treasures in heaven in another place in Scripture too. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' most famous sermon. And in Matthew 6, he kind of goes into this in a little bit more detail. In verse 19, it says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal." Anything that you have in this life, the stuff that we have, one day it's going to burn. One day it's not going to be valuable. One day the next greatest version of that will come out and you won't even like yours as much. One day it's just going to be a garage full of junk that your kids or grandkids are going to have to go through and get rid of. My books mean very little to nothing to my kids or grandkids. I don't have grandkids yet. future grandkid. None of this stuff matters in the end because we can't take any of the stuff with us. So what Jesus says is make an investment where you can make a difference in heaven. So here's my question. If we can't take our stuff in heaven, how can we impact heaven? What can you and I do that's going to make a difference in heaven? Because we know we can't change God because God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if we're having the conversation about, hey, how can I impact heaven? Usually we've already made the choice to follow Jesus ourselves. So how can we make an impact in heaven if we can't take anything with us, if God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and we've already decided that we're a follower of Jesus? One of the last things Jesus said to his disciples in Matthew 28, he said, all authority and power has been given to me. And he told them, now you go into all and make disciples of all the nations. Go make more followers and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey all that I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus, in that, we call this the Great Commission, gives not just the disciples, but us as followers of Jesus, our game plan of what we are supposed to do. We are to go and make disciples. You want to know how you impact heaven? You increase the roster. You get more people in. You share your faith. Our investment in heaven is our investment in the faith of other people. One of our values as a church is that we want to invite others into our faith journey. Because I want to impact heaven. I want more people to be there because I said yes to the commission that Jesus gave me. So, how are you laying up treasures in heaven? And how does it compare to the treasures that you're laying up on earth? How could you use your treasures that you've laid up on earth to impact the treasures you're laying up in heaven? What would it look like if the next time somebody gave you a Starbucks gift card, you called your neighbor and said, hey, you want to go grab coffee? That's laying up a treasure in heaven. What would it look like if the next time someone asked you to coach the Little League soccer team and you really didn't want to? You said yes because you had an opportunity to lay up treasures in heaven. Matthew 22. There's a man that comes to Jesus and asks him the question. He's trying to trick him. He goes, what's the greatest commandment? And what Jesus does in Matthew 22, verse 37, is that he quotes an old Hebrew prayer from Exodus. It's called the Shema. And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Other gospels I'll add on there with all your strength. He said, this is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And in this, Jesus orients our priority system for how to make the investment in heaven, how to lay up your treasure in heaven. It starts by making a decision that the most valuable decision that you can make for your future is prioritizing your relationship with God. Once we have that, once our relationship with God is heart, soul, mind, and strength, our natural next step is going to be reflecting that love to other people. We love God first and then we love people. We love God most and then we love people. We invest in our relationship with God so that we can invest in others and we can have the roster of heaven increase. So how are you waking up and loving Jesus every single day? How are you prioritizing your relationship with him? Are you waking up and going, hey, I got to go to work so I can make money, so I can sack it away and have retirement one day or get that car I want or that house I want? Are you waking up and going, okay, Jesus, what's next? Why do you go to work? Is this so you can bring home a paycheck and just provide? Or are you asking the question, okay, Jesus, what's next? Why do you save? Is it just for your own comfort in future? Is it for your retirement so you can pass something on to your kids? Maybe you need to look at your savings and go, okay, Jesus, what's next? What investments are you making in God's kingdom? How can you do what you do and make an impact in someone else's life at the same time? Because the truth is, most of you aren't going to go out from this sermon and change your jobs. But maybe you change how you approach your job. And it's less about emails and spreadsheets and clocking in or clocking out. And it's more about, okay, Jesus, what's next? Where's the next conversation? Who's the next person that I get to show your love to? Retired folks, let me ask you this question. Do you view your retirement as an opportunity to eat, drink, and be merry? Or are you asking God what you should do with the extra time he's given you? One of my mentors is an associate pastor, an executive pastor in town that retired a couple years ago. But now he works with pastors like me in smaller churches, and he does executive pastor work for us, and he helps coach us and leads us and teaches us. I swear the man is busy. He had a hip replacement surgery on Tuesday. On Friday, he was meeting with other pastors already again. And I asked him, I was like, man, you're so busy in retirement, this doesn't seem like retirement. He goes, I just retired from stress. Now I get to do the ministry I want to do. He wakes up every day and asks the questions, what's next, Jesus? So here's my question to you. What's your why? What is your why? What is your purpose? Is it you? Is it selfish? Or is it more than you? Do you need to change your why? And if we can get our why to being about prioritizing our relationship with God, the next question that I want each of us to wrestle with is this question right here. What is your next step in your relationship with God? I believe every single one of us has a next step in our relationships with God. Yours is going to be different than mine. Maybe your step is to read your Bible every day. Maybe your next step is, instead of listening to talk radio on the way to work, you're going to put on worship music and have a little bit of time of worship with God. Maybe your next step is serving at VBS. Maybe your next step is for the first time walking into this idea of tithing and what that looks like to say yes with your finances. Maybe your next step with Jesus is going on a mission trip. Most of you know that last month, I went to Israel, and here in September, I'm going to Guatemala. Both of those are trips, or scouting trips, because we want to take Lighthouse on trips and make an investment in international missions. Maybe that's your next step. Maybe your next step is signing up for C-Corps to serve the people who are in our community who are hungry. Maybe your next step is leading a small group. Maybe your next step is going to a small group and committing to go. Your next step is going to be different than my next step. But each one of us has a next step to take in our relationship with God. And I think it matters, because when we can prioritize that relationship, what we're saying is that we're prioritizing God and we're prioritizing his purpose, and we're asking the question every single day, what's next, Jesus? So what's your next step? In your notes this morning, if you have them, there's a blank at the bottom. There's nothing to go in that blank except for what you write. It's for you to put in what your next step with Jesus is. Because I want each one of us, when we walk out of this room, to have a deeper understanding. If you're like, I have no idea where to start, my challenge is what step would help you grow closer in your relationship with God? Is it reading the Bible? Is it worship? Is it getting more plugged in? Go from there. But this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to bow your head and close your eyes, because I want to pray over us this morning. I don't want to pray that God brings us clarity. So, Father, I thank you so much that when we invest, when we prioritize our relationship with you, God, it allows us to make an impact, an eternal impact in others. And whatever each of our next steps look like, I pray that you make that abundantly clear for each man and woman in this room, for anyone who's listening online. God, bring to our hearts and our minds what our next step in our relationship with you is. Let us continue to pursue you so that we can love other people and make a difference in the roster of heaven. I thank you so much for your goodness, for your love, for your mercy and grace. And for those in the room who've never taken that first step to follow you, Lord, I pray that you press it upon their hearts that today is a good day to say yes to following you. God, we thank you so much for your goodness, for your glory. And it is in your name that we pray. Amen.